Thank you very much, Mr. Sisip, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest speaker, Secretary Florencio Butch Abad, has been prominent in the media, most recently in connection with the 2.2 billion peso allocation to the district of Congresswoman Arroyo. But as it turns out, this is not part of the pork barrel. It is part of the ODA that President Gloria Arroyo negotiated during her term. So you don't really need an extensive introduction on what Butch Abad has been up to, but some of you may not be familiar with his background. Butch Abad is an activist. He was a unionist in the Federation of Free Labor at the Ateneo, but he also has very strong academic credentials. He took his degree in business management at the Ateneo de Manila University, and then took up a law degree at the Ateneo Law School, and also obtained a master's in public administration from the Kennedy School. He overcame the advantages of his education, however, to become a successful politician. For a period of 10 years, he represented the district of Batanes. In the 2004 elections, he was actually president of the Liberal Party. So he has been a successful politician. He has also been a policymaker. He was a secretary of agrarian reform in the early days of the Aquino cabinet, and then served as a secretary of education in the second term of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, unfortunately for a rather brief period. I promise him I will not dwell on his achievement and notoriety as a member of the Hayaten. But we thought it would be quite appropriate to have him as our guest speaker at this event, because the anti-corruption campaign is one of the flagship programs of this administration. And 5 months into his term as Secretary of the Budget and Management, Secretary Abad has already made his contribution to this campaign. I think this is the first time in 10 years that the government has finally produced a budget within the mandated deadlines. And of course, it is a budget that is passed on time is more transparent than one which is reenacted, and one which is reenacted being more vulnerable to manipulation. So on this score, we feel that it is very appropriate that we have with us Secretary Butch Abad. Butch.
Thank you, EJ, Dr. Sisip, Steve, honored guests, good evening. You know, as I speak here, the House of Representatives is currently voting on the budget on third reading, which means my budget should be going to the Senate this week. And if that is the case, then we should be able to have a budget before Christmas. But we're not satisfied with that. We're starting our budget call this November with a national planning workshop on November 26 and 27. Because what we want to do next year is submit the budget on the day that the President delivers his sonnet. So we'll have 1 more month of debates in the House, which means even a better chance of getting the budget through congressional authorization within the year in next year. 42% of Filipino voters took ownership of the campaign to uplift the nation through good governance. It was not Noynoy Aquino's campaign alone, but I believe those of us in the campaign believe, but our people's. The 2010 elections clearly showed that the Filipino people have become very much aware of the fact that corruption, patronage, and self-serving leadership are the major reasons why government has failed to emancipate our people from poverty and bring prosperity to our nation. To us who were part of the presidential campaign, by the way, I got invited to a forum when Professor Johnston was here early this year, but I was busy managing the president's campaign, so I couldn't be in that forum, but I got a copy of the book, Steve. And now, to us who belong to the Aquino government, the very concise message of the President then in Tagalog, kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap, is not a mere slogan. It is a social covenant that then candidate Noynoy Aquino made with the Filipino people, that the nation will be lifted from poverty through honest governance, and that he will be the first and most determined fighter against corruption. You're right, Mr. Sisip. It's always encouraging to have a leader where you have no iota of doubt that he's committed for a cause like this. We believe that the resounding mandate gained by President Aquino, first during the May election and more recently, as indicated in his trust ratings, is in support not only for a compelling governance platform, but also for a vision of renewed hope and prosperity for our country. And there is tremendous risk for this government, for if we fail in achieving the stern expectations we have set for ourselves, it will be hard for this country to start again. In this book we are launching today, and we are thankful for Professor Johnston, Political and Social Foundations for Reform, Anti-Corruption Strategies for the Philippines, Professor Johnston stresses the need for sustained political support for reform from top and bottom. Professor Johnston warns against assuming that citizens will automatically and actively back reform, noting the risk of collective action problems. I believe that these possible collective action problems are deeply rooted in the socio-political context that we are in today, in the oligarch and clan syndrome that we have. This risk of collective action problems are much more exacerbated, and I think more than the problems of corruption that we have seen over the past almost a decade. I think one of the saddest legacies of the past administration is the entrenchment of the system of political patronage in this country, which we have been engaging as we are trying to pass the budget in the House. Let me share some of the insights I've gathered in my new assignment as Budget and Management Secretary. Our work in the Department of Budget and Management does not only deal with the administrative or the technical aspects of the budget. I always remind our DBM people, as well as the civil society organizations who engage with us, that the budget process is essentially a political process. It is in the exercise of power that decides who gets what, by when, where, and how, and of course, why. There is a constant struggle considering the limited resources of government vis-a-vis the vast needs, wants, and desires in society, especially in a regime of deficit. You will see this struggle as between institutions, the most obvious of which is that between the executive and Congress in the authorization of the budget. To those of you who know better, you will say that the struggle between institutions are just some sort of a proxy war between interests competing for the national wealth. As we have seen all through the years, when a few control the wealth and power of this country, then there's a bigger section of our society that are deprived not only of wealth, but also of hope. In the process of planning, legislating, and disbursing the national budget in this context, the government is faced with these choices. The default is to accede to the interests of the status quo, to play the game of patronage, to surrender to the will of the privileged, largely clans and oligarchs, who will fight it out even in violent ways to keep the status quo intact. A subset of this is to be incrementalist, to put a little bit of funds everywhere in an attempt to appease everybody. Meanwhile, if you want to manage our fiscal state, if you want to be able to address the urgent needs of the poor, if you want an economy that provides equal opportunities, this means structuring the budget within a framework of empowerment, particularly to address the sectors historically ignored or exploited by the budget process. In effect, we have come to an awareness that in all areas of governance, even those that are seemingly devoid of politics, such as fiscal management, politics permeates. And with this, if we are to ensure that our anti-corruption and reform efforts will succeed, then we have to make sure good politics takes its place. I believe good politics rests in the leadership, not in the leadership alone, for it entails giving the people a stake in governance, to open up space for their participation and involvement, to the point of allowing themselves to take ownership of their government. Professor Johnston is proposing for us a strategy on how to ensure people have a stake in governance, with them providing sustained political support to the government's reform agenda. Allow me to build on this discussion on strategies against corruption. He stresses on the need to link reform to the provision of social services to address the people's pressing needs. Corruption control has to be framed in terms of providing for the people's own interests, that there are dividends from good governance. I believe that this government has framed this message quite clearly. Kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. I also believe that this message will not change. We won by carrying this message, and I believe it is most apt to carry this to the end of President Aquino's term. Relative to the crafting of the national budget for 2011, President Aquino instructed us in the DBM to make each and every government peso count in empowering the poor by minimizing or even taking out all opportunities for patronage and corruption. And two, ensuring that concrete, direct, and relevant efforts to uplift the poor are amply funded in the budget. You have already heard about the zero-based budgeting approach that we employed in the 2011 reform budget. Actually, I told the President on the first day of Cabinet that this was going to be difficult and this should better be approached in the 2012 budget. But then he insisted that you do this now in the 2011 budget. We managed to do it in about 60% of the major budget items. And this has allowed us to reduce or even eliminate funding for programs and projects that have been ineffective, fraught with leakages, or susceptible to partisan intrusion. In fact, on lump sum budgeting, since Professor Johnston suggested ending this, we are in fact moving in that direction. If not to eliminate altogether lump sum budgeting, we reform the way these are disbursed, such as irrigation and farm-to-market road lump sums, where releases are contingent on the development of master plans. Because of this, we have been able to invest significantly in key social services, the highest allocation in the budget right now at 35%, such as education, healthcare, and social protection, among others, and show this government's unabashed bias for the poor and vulnerable. Let me note in particular the very controversial conditional cash transfer program, funding for which we have more than doubled to 21 billion next year, in order to directly reach around 2.3 million household beneficiaries out of the targeted 4.6 million by the end of 2011. This expanded CCT program has gained both accolades and criticisms. But I believe such criticisms, to paraphrase what Professor Ben Diokno said in his column last month,